Welcome back to the Omnibus Cafe, where we talk all things collected edition comic books. My name's Kevin, and today I want to talk about Brian K. Vaughan's Ex Machina, which asks the question, what if superheroes existed and changed the events of 9/11? Grab you a cup of coffee, and let's check out this book. All right, so here is Ex Machina. And before we dig into the books, I just want to kind of explain a little bit about this. So this was originally published under WildStorm in single issues, then trade paperbacks, then these deluxe oversized hardcovers, which I prefer and are beautiful, but it has since been reprinted under the DC Black label in both compendium format and omnibus format. Now, I can't speak for the compendiums, but I know that the omnibus format is still widely available. I'll put a link in the description of where you can buy this from Panel Bound Comics. But let's take a look at these books and learn a little bit about the characters. All right, so here's book one of Ex Machina, created by Brian K. Vaughan and Tony Harris, who's doing some just immaculate artwork on this story. But what the hell is Ex Machina all about? Well, our main character, his name is Mitchell 100, and we'll learn throughout the story a little bit more about him, but Mitchell gets superpowers. He is a civil engineer for the city of New York, and while investigating something under a Brooklyn Bridge, he gets superpowers, and these superpowers allow him to talk to machines. So anything that is machines, he can speak to. It also includes his best friend, Rick Bradbury, who's a former Marine and head of security for the Mitchell 100 administration. And yeah, just absolute best friend. Then we get, I can't remember her name. She's a journalist, Suzanne Padilla. And she is just kind of in Mitchell's face, asking him a lot of questions. But what this story really revolves around, and here you get to see a little bit about how he gets his powers. The art's fantastic. The story is at times very violent and sometimes very gruesome. But Tony Harris does a good job portraying that. But he gets his powers in like R 1999, and eventually, in September of 2001, Mitchell 100, as the Great Machine, saves Tower 2 of the World Trade Centers from being hit. And at that point decides to kind of parlay that fame into a political career, runs for mayor of New York as an independent, and ends up winning. So he becomes the mayor of New York shortly after Rudy Giuliani. And he runs as an independent. And so throughout this book, you'll get him fighting with Democrats and Republicans and their policies, because he's, kind of not down the middle, but he's got, a little bit of both sides, very independent thinker. He's also constantly at odds with the governor in Albany. We'll also meet Dave Wiley, who is Mitchell 100's loyal deputy mayor, closest confidant, really close friends. They do butt heads at times, but he's a really cool character. So what is going on in this story? Here's another character that you'll meet, and this is Commissioner Angadi. So she is the incoming commissioner who was appointed by a Republican, and he decides to keep her on because he needs someone to check his policies and just his thinking. So here you get this really cool image that we'll never get to see because this is a story, right? This is fiction, but only one of the World Trade Centers came down in 9/11. Now, if you were alive and experienced 9/11, September 11th, and the terrorist attacks, this will really hit home for you if you remember kind of shortly thereafter, just the shock and awe of something that huge happening in our lifetimes, but also just, kind of what it changed, how it changed life. And, the thought of terrorism being everywhere and everything that was scary could be terrorism. And Just I think if you lived in New York or just were alive during 1911 and watched the news, this will really hit home. But early in his term as mayor, Mitchell Hundred is kind of up against it. So we get New York's worst blizzard in the past 50 years, and an unknown killer is shooting and murdering snowplow drivers. Snowplow drivers stop showing up for work. They're obviously fearing for their life. And Mayor Hundred has to pull all the stops with Commissioner Angadi to stop these killings and avoid a citywide shutdown. So you'll get a lot of these kind of fairly mundane things that a mayor would go up against. But this book is really good at, telling you stories of him in the present and flashing back to his days as the Great Machine with his superpower and ability to talk to machines. Another character that we'll meet, really important character. This is Ivan Tereshkov, or Kremlin. He's a mechanic and a mentor who kind of inspired Mitchell to become the Great Machine. He's kind of a family friend. Got Mitchell into comic books as a young kid, which is really cool. But throughout this story, he's really disappointed in the fact that Mitchell Hundred decided to retire the Great Machine superhero life and become a mayor. So he's constantly trying to push Mitchell back into that superhero life. Another character that you'll get to know is Journal Moore. She's an intern who Mitchell promotes to advisor of young people or something like that. But again, just beautiful art by Tony Harris. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And again, you'll flash back in time quite consistently to his early days as the Great Machine, and more specifically to the time or the year leading up to the events of 9/11. So as the Great Machine, his sidekicks are Ivan, who goes by the name Kremlin, and his best friend, Rick Bradbury. They're kind of his guys at the computer on the radio telling him where things are. So the next story that we get into is New York sees this kind of wave of graffiti, but it's really different graffiti. Anyone who looks at this graffiti, these weird glyphs, ends up having terrible seizures. And there's something about them that makes Mitchell Hundred think that they're tied to the source of his powers. So he's got to investigate it. Now, one thing that's really important that we learn early on and is important throughout this entire story is Mitchell is, again, an independent politician, and Commissioner Angadi is very much Republican, and they are constantly at odds. They will at times seem like they're on the same page, but she is very hesitant to believe that he is not still acting as a superhero vigilante. And she says that if you ever put on that suit again, I will arrest you. I will take you down. So we get a little bit more background on Mitch. This book's really good at, the present time as the politician and jumping back to the past as a superhero. But we find Mitchell Hundred being summoned for jury duty, and he decides not to use his mayor card to get out of it, and instead tries to inspire some civic duty in the city by actually being a juror. Now, while he's sequestered, a great machine copycat is on the loose, and his best friend Bradbury and mentor Ivan try to track it down and put a stop to it. Meanwhile, Mitch is forced to use his powers again as one of the jurors is holding another one hostage in the deliberating room, in a really cool story. Then we get a little more backstory on Mitch as he travels south to meet his kind of estranged mom, who's living in a trailer park with this nutbag. And we learn a little bit more about how his dad died and some of his upbringing and why his mom decided to leave. Then in the next story, we get a protest march that Mitchell Hundred as mayor grants the permit for this protest. And again, this is post 9/11, so, tensions are high. There's the fear of terrorism. And during this protest, a biological weapon is detonating, sparking more fear of terrorism. Police Chief Angadi asked Mitchell to go against her wishes and the deal he has with the CIA to not use his powers. But she actually asks him, say, hey, we might need you to use your powers to find who this is so that we can stop any future terrorism. Then we see more of the Great Machine kind of in the months leading up to 9/11, and he meets his arch nemesis, who I'll try to get to here on the page to show you who that is. This guy here. So this guy's name is Jack Fearson, and he is the Great Machine's arch nemesis. And he gains the abilities to communicate with animals, similar to how Mitch can communicate with machines. And he kind of wages this extremist animal rights campaign against Mitchell. So we get a little more, back in time, prior to him being mayor, fighting against this Jack Fearson guy who's a Looney Tune. And we get this really cool story where Mitchell Hundred gets swept up into the politics of marijuana. And, and again, this is 2002, 2003-ish, I think, when this came out. So a much different time than what we're living in today. But as that's going on, and just look at some of this gruesome artwork, just really cool stuff by Tony Harris. But as he's dealing with this, the politics surrounding the legalization of marijuana, we get this story where this person is impersonating a New York firefighter, right? New York firefighters were the heroes of 9/11. But this person is impersonating them, breaking in, and killing people. In the next story, we kind of continue on with the Mary J stuff. We get this low-level dealer back in Mitchell's superhero days, who he ends up getting put into prison, and then he's murdered. And it really makes Mitchell think about kind of how he thought about this, right? This kid went into prison for this really low-level crime and ended up being killed. We learn a little bit more about Ivan, who goes by the name Kremlin. I'll probably say Kremlin a lot more. And he's got kind of plans of his own. He's in the background working on things. Like I said earlier, he's really disappointed that Mitch gave up the superhero life to become mayor of New York, and we really see where his loyalties lie. So we see a little bit more of Mitchell post, the explosion that gave him his powers, and how he became aware of his powers. And we get that kind of, early Spider-Man type stuff, early superhero stuff, where he's playing around, creating his suit, and really just learning how to be a superhero. And then we end this book 3, learning a little bit more about the events that transpired on September 11th, that morning, where Mitchell was, what happened with the first tower, how he stopped the plane from hitting the second one. And all throughout this, Mitchell is dealing with a KKK rally. So again, it's really good at, showing you modern politics against superhero life. So as we continue on, Mitch Hundred is invited to meet the Pope in Rome. While he's there, a Russian man is trying to hack into Mitchell's kind of machine-like mind to force him to assassinate the Pope. We learn a little bit more about Commissioner Angadi, her marital problems, and how the Great Machine saved her husband's life on 9/11, which caused this major conflict within Commissioner Angadi, who is very much against vigilantism and the Great Machine on a whole. Mitchell Hundred is able to get the Republican National Committee to hold a major campaign event in New York City, which, again, at the time, 9/11 just happened. Everyone's concerned about security. So this is a big thing. But there's this masked woman running around town causing absolute chaos as she pulls multiple stunts in protest of President Bush. Mayor Hundred was set to do a speech at this event, but the masked woman, who calls herself Trouble, put a major damper on that. But at the end, Mitch is actually offered the role within the Bush administration if he were to not run for a second term. And as we close this story out, we get this really awesome Grant Morrison-esque meta issue where Mayor Hundred is commissioning a story of his life and his political journey through a graphic novel. And so we actually get to meet Brian K. Let me try to find it here. It's at the end of this. But we meet Brian K. Vaughan and Tony Harris in this comic. And it's just absolutely... Here's Brian K. Vaughan showing up to the mayor's office to pitch his story, right? And he's kind of an underdog at this point, you know, but they really think they're going to be able to pitch this. So he spends time, Brian K. Vaughan, one of the creators of this book, with his creation, Mitchell 100, saying, here's why I should do your story. And they have this really awesome interaction, this really awesome conversation, very, very meta, very Grant Morrison. And at the end of it, really funny, kind of tongue-in-cheek, they end up giving it to Garth Ennis and Jim Lee. So as we get into the last book, Mitchell 100 announces his future political moves. All the while, rats are on the street, murdering people, and somehow the Great Machine's arch nemesis, Jack Fearson, is thought to be alive. He was presumed dead for the longest time. Something from Bradbury and Mitchell's past comes back to haunt them as Suzanne Padilla is investigating that's something that could ruin Mitch's political career. We learn that someone close to Mitch has recently obtained powers, and they're eerily similar to the source of his powers. This new villain is taking out people close to Mitchell. Time's ticking. Things are really escalating quickly. And Mayor 100's mom, Martha, is in grave danger. And finally, Mitchell 100 puts on his Great Machine suit again to battle this new foe. And I don't want to give away any more of this, but just a fantastic story. You have to check this out. All right, so final thoughts on Ex Machina by Brian K. Vaughan and Tony Harris, co-creator. I want to start off by talking about Tony Harris's art. It's beautiful. It's just near perfect. He does such a good job. Elements of realism. I like how he uses photos. He takes photos of friends in certain positions to help draw his art and make it look as real as possible. But as you saw in the overhead shot, the art by Tony Harris is fantastic, and I need to check out more of his work. Now on to the story. I'm a big Brian K. Vaughan fan. He's my favorite author of all time. There's my Brian K. Vaughan shelf. Why the Last Man is my favorite book of all time. But where does Ex Machina rank? It's up there. It's very good. It's such a fun, interesting story. I mean, we've had stories like this that kind of imagine what if superheroes existed in a real world. But this one tackles the subject of 9/11 and the terrorism of 2001 so well. Brian K. Vaughan does dialogue incredibly well. His issues are very episodic, right? They land on this note. We're like, holy crap, I got to read the next one. Just fantastic stuff. While it's not my favorite Brian K. Vaughan story of all time, it is so much fun. The Omnibus edition is widely available for around $50. I'm still a big fan of the 5 oversized hardcover editions just because they're a little more manageable. But let me know down in the comments what you guys thought of Ex Machina and what your favorite Brian K. Vaughan story is. And we'll see you on the next review. See you, Omnibuds.
If you're looking for great deals on collected edition comics or manga, we recommend shopping at panelboundcomics.com. They offer free shipping on orders over $30, plus bundled discounts to help you save even more. And if you're shopping from Europe or the UK, comicsbugle.com offers free EU shipping and a rewards program for regular buyers. Don't forget to use our discount codes at checkout.